The fantastic ties, and I think it's a fantastic quarter-final draw altogether. I think every team that's left in it has got a chance to get into the final. And I think, obviously, I think we take the Arsenal game first. Arsenal Bayern Munich. I think the last three times they've played, Bayern have scored 5 times against Arsenal. So there's a few ghosts to bury there. But the biggest ghost, obviously, is Harry Kane, because he's the guy that Arsenal fans will know could end their hopes. He's tormented them over the years for Tottenham. He's probably the best striker in the world right now. I think Erling Haaland might have something to say about that. But Harry Kane, he's 36 goals in 34 games this year for Bayern Munich. So it is all about Harry Kane going back to North London and trying to end Arsenal's hopes as well as keeping his alive. So that's a fantastic tie with that, that extra kind of subplot to it as well. And then with the City Real Madrid game, as we know, it's a third year in succession that these two have played each other. You've got Pep Guardiola up against Real Madrid, having been at Barcelona. It's a tough one to call, but I think City get through this tie because they were so dominant in the semi-final last year against Real Madrid that I think that gap is too big to close. And I think, City got the goal scorers and Real probably don't have that. So two brilliant ties. They could go either way, but I think City go through, but I think Arsenal, I think Harry Kane might shoot them down.
Yeah, what's your take on it, Jeremy? Do you think we're going to really see what this Arsenal team is made of? No Arsenal team's won the Champions League, got City in the league, haven't they? And then this tie with Bayern. Do you feel that it's all going to become apparent that how credible they are?
Yeah, absolutely. I was covering Arsenal for those 4 ties against Bayern Munich, which seem to come every year. And as Mark alluded to, they became very repetitive. Arsenal really were on the end of some big beatings in that period. But I think it's really interesting how it's a sign of how the plates have shifted in the Premier League and in European football, that Arsenal can go into this, even though they've not been in Champions League, and they were in Champions League so regularly in that period, with more optimism, more hope than they did in any of those ties really under Arsene Wenger. It was a time really when Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, Barcelona were so dominant in Europe, but now it feels like Premier League teams really, really do have the upper hand. So I think Arsenal have got a great chance. Obviously, it's Bayern Munich and they're a top team, and Harry Kane has got this brilliant record against Arsenal. But it's interesting how Kane's obviously been magnificent individually, but has he made Bayern better as a team? We know that Bundesliga, they've got a lot of ground to make up. So I think it's completely different picture on it for Arsenal. I think Arsenal got a great chance of going through. They don't have to go with any of the sort of fear they did under those sort of sequence of games under Wenger. So it should be really fantastic ties. And as for the City, Real Madrid one, I think City have clearly been the best team in Europe for a long time. Over 2 legs, you'd always favour them. I suppose the one question is just because they're so competitive in the Premier League at the moment in such a 3-way battle, whereas Madrid have got a bit of a buffer in La Liga, and that I just wonder whether that kind of evens it out a little bit. But all things being equal, 2-leg ties, you'd always back City to get through.
It could be Arsenal-Man City in the semi-finals. No English final at Wembley then. Do you think, Mark, that there'll be a lot of English fans, though, quietly rooting for Kane and Bellingham to do well in some ways? Obviously not Arsenal and City fans.
I think probably. I think people get a bit carried away sometimes thinking that all English fans want English clubs to do well in Europe, and generally they don't. They want to see their big rivals get knocked out. So I'd imagine that Tottenham fans, Chelsea fans want to see Arsenal lose. And I can imagine it's a similar story with United fans, Liverpool fans with Man City. But I think, ultimately, we've got 2 great teams going to win the Champions League. And I think, obviously, Arsenal haven't won it, and that is a big thing on them. And I think the fact that they played Bayern Munich, who have beaten them convincingly in the past, I think Arsenal at the moment are capable of beating Bayern Munich. They've got the players, they've got the squad to do it, they've got the belief to do it. But it's a case of whether they can look at the Bayern Munich badge and not be fazed by it, because I think beating Porto and overcoming on penalties was a big thing for Arsenal, getting through that round of 16 after so many years of not actually winning a knockout tie in the Champions League. They've done that now. But what they have to do now is beat one of the established heavyweights of European football, albeit a team that is not quite at its best in Bayern Munich, but it's still Bayern Munich. They've still got a coach like Thomas Tuchel who's won it before. They've got Kane. They've got all these great players, Thomas Muller, Manuel Neuer. They're still a super efficient team. It's whether Arsenal can believe they can win that tie. But if they can potentially face City in the semis and set it up for, who knows, Arsenal could win the Champions League in London. What a story that would be.
Absolutely, and Jeremy, I don't think that Bayern Munich have conceded the Bundesliga title just yet, but they're well off the pace to Bayer Leverkusen. Back page of the Express, the headline, "Look who's back, Kane is gunning for old enemies Arsenal again." How big is Bayern Munich's motivation in this fixture? How big is Harry Kane's? Because you never know when that trophy will come, if not this season.
Yeah, well, going on talking about the Bayern Munich games when I was covering Arsenal at that period, obviously big memories of Harry Kane causing the massive problems time and time again in fixtures. And although obviously the Arsenal team is completely, I don't think there would be a single player left from that period when Kane was at his absolute peak against them. In those derby fixtures where they took some beatings. It's a different. I just think it's a different time for Arsenal now, and I feel quite optimistic about it for them. In terms of Bayern, I guess with the Bundesliga set up as it is, Champions League is going to be their big focus for the season now. That looks like their best chance of a trophy, and as a team, it's obviously not worked. It's not quite right at the moment. Tuchel's going to go at the end of the season, so maybe just the knockout nature of the Champions League that could, and the focus that they'll put into that could make them extremely dangerous.
Absolutely, big side of the draw, that Real Madrid, Man City, and Arsenal, Bayern. Mark, finally though, who do you think could win the Champions League? Just looking at the other side of things, do you think Mbappe could sign off with one when you look at how it might open up for PSG?
Well, the way that he performed in the last round against Real Sociedad, do you think that it looks like he's on a mission to take PSG all the way to the final? I think they'll beat Barcelona. I think it's an indifferent Barcelona team, and PSG aren't great, but they've got Mbappe. So I think it's going to be a City Atletico Madrid final. I think Atletico will beat Dortmund, and then they'll take care of PSG in the semi. So that's my tip, and I think City will win it. But obviously, they are in a very strong side of the draw, Man City, so anything could happen there. But I think you just look at their form, their recent performances, and how they play under Pep Guardiola. It's going to be so hard to beat City over two legs. But in the final, anyone's got a chance, and whether it's PSG or Atletico, it'll be a great final. But I still think City will come out as winners. Yeah,
Simeone against Guardiola in the final at Wembley would be a clash of styles. Would be brilliant stuff. Quickly, Jeremy, before we move on, give us 10 seconds who you think is going to prevail in the Champions League, win it at this point.
Bit of a boring answer. You'd have to back Manchester City. I just wonder about PSG and Mbappe's last season. It just sort of feels law of averages. PSG, and they're on the right side of the draw. So I'll go PSG or Manchester City.